the numbness no one talks about. Awakening isn't bliss at first. You thought awakening would feel like peace, but instead, all you feel is nothing. You don't cry anymore. You don't laugh anymore. You stare out the window like a ghost of the person you used to be. And you wonder, is something wrong with me? Because you thought spiritual awakening would set you free. Instead, it has made you feel like a stranger in your own body. But this numbness, this is part of it. Carl Jung knew this silence well. He called it the dark night of the soul, a phase in spiritual evolution where the ego dies and the soul begins to speak. But here's the truth. It doesn't use words. At first, it uses silence, a deep, deafening silence. Why you feel numb? The ego has lost its ground. Most people think spiritual awakening means you suddenly feel happy, that you've reached some mountaintop of bliss and enlightenment. But that's not how real transformation works. The first stage of awakening isn't light. It's death, not physical death, but the death of illusion, the death of everything you used to believe about yourself, the death of the identity you spent your whole life building. And that's why you feel numb. You are not broken. You are in mourning. Carl Jung said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. He knew that the awakening process wasn't about gaining joy right away. It was about facing the loss of who you thought you were. Imagine spending your whole life living inside a house, familiar walls, predictable routines. Even if it was chaotic, at least it made sense. Then one day, the house burns down, and you're standing in the ashes, alone, barefoot, and cold. That's what awakening feels like. And of course, you feel numb, because the part of you that used to feel was tied to the identity that just died. The old self is gone, and the new self hasn't fully arrived. The myth of bliss, awakening is not ecstasy, it's dismantling. There's a dangerous myth in spiritual circles that awakening means you're always in a state of love and light, that your chakras align and you float in eternal peace. But Carl Jung warned against this kind of spiritual inflation. He believed that awakening requires descending into the underworld of the psyche, not bypassing it. He said, no tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. In other words, you cannot reach spiritual heights until you face psychological depths, and in those depths, you will find numbness. Why? Because your nervous system is protecting you. You've just been ripped from your old world, your beliefs, your routines, your emotional patterns. They no longer make sense. The brain and body enter a freeze state, not because you are weak, but because you are reorganizing. You've stopped reacting to the world the way you used to, but you haven't yet found new ways to feel, love, or express. You're suspended, floating in the liminal space between what was and what could be. The silence is not emptiness. It's the soul-clearing space. Here's what no one tells you. Numbness is not nothingness. It's spaciousness. It's the soul clearing the clutter of who you were, so it can reveal who you really are. Jung taught that the self, your true, unified self, emerges not by addition, but by subtraction. Not by gaining something new, but by letting go of what is false. And when the ego's illusions dissolve, there's a quiet, a terrifying quiet. It feels like emptiness. But it's not. It's potential. You are not void. You are soil. Something is trying to grow through you. But first, you had to become still enough to hear it. Think about it. The deepest changes in nature happen in silence. Seeds sprout underground. Caterpillars transform in cocoons. Wounds heal in the dark. So, when you feel numb, you are not failing. You are transforming in a way that no one else can see. And maybe you can't either. Yet, the pain of disconnection. Why no one around you gets it. One of the most painful aspects of post-awakening numbness is that no one around you understands. You try to explain that something in you has shifted, but they say things like, maybe you're just depressed. You need to get out more. Snap out of it. But this isn't a mood. It's not something you can distract away. This is spiritual disorientation. Carl Jung experienced this too. He wrote about what he called his confrontation with the unconscious. a time in his life where everything external seemed to vanish, and he descended into inner chaos. He saw visions, spoke with inner figures, felt lost, haunted, unsure of his own mind. But through that descent, he discovered the self, the deep, unshakable self beneath the ego. You might not see it now, but the numbness is part of your path back to wholeness. You are not broken. You are being remade. And when the numbness lifts, when the soul returns to your body, you will feel again. But this time, not from fear, not from survival, from truth. If you've made it this far, let me tell you something most people won't. You are not alone. And you are not crazy. You are in a sacred in-between, where the false self has died, and the true self is still becoming. If this video has spoken to your soul, if it made you cry or just made you feel seen, click the like button, share it with someone else in the silent middle of their awakening, and subscribe because this journey needs companions. Drop a comment below and tell me what part of this spoke to your heart the loudest. I'm reading every single one. Now take a breath, feel the silence again, and trust the numbness is not the end. It's the beginning of something real. The death of the old self. Why you feel empty after expanding. You're not going backward. Even if everything feels quiet, dull, or disconnected, you're actually moving forward, just not in the way the ego wants. This stage, this silence, is a spiritual detox, a sacred unraveling, and it begins with death. Carl Jung described it as unnecessary suffering, an initiation. He called it the night sea journey, the soul's descent into chaos, so that a deeper order can be born. And that journey always begins with the death of who you thought you were, not the person others saw, but the story you clung to, the masks you wore, the roles you identified with, the version of you that hustled for approval, the one who confused survival with love, the one who silenced their truth to belong. That version dies quietly, without a funeral, and no one tells you how much that hurts, how much grief can come. When a version of you is no longer there to respond to life, you find yourself waking up, but with no appetite for the life you used to love, no interest in small talk, no thrill in the things that once lit you up. You're not lazy, you're not ungrateful, you're in withdrawal from the false self. This is not dysfunction, this is depth. Carl Jung's own spiritual crisis lasted years. During that time, he withdrew from social life. He confronted terrifying visions and inner symbols, and he wrote extensively in what later became the Red Book. He was not chasing light. He was sitting with shadow. Jung understood that before you can integrate a higher self, the structures of the ego must fall apart. And when they do, you don't feel alive. You feel empty. Why? Because the ego gave you structure. Even if it was false, even if it was painful, it still told you who you were. And now, there is only space. This is why awakening often gets mistaken for depression. But it's not the same. Depression is often a suppression, but awakening is revelation. It's exposure. You're not losing your mind, you're shedding it, so something deeper can emerge. There's a sacred pause between the death of the old self and the birth of the new one. And in that pause is the void. No answers, no motivation, no identity to grab onto. Just silence. But the void is not the enemy. It's the womb. Carl Jung said, in all chaos there is a cosmos. In all disorder a secret order. The soul does not rebuild on your timeline. It rebuilds in divine timing. The void is your soul's construction site. No walls yet, no blueprint you can understand, but something is forming. Underneath the numbness, beyond the confusion, you are becoming someone who no longer reacts, but responds. Someone who no longer performs, but is. You are becoming real. It's easy to mistake this stage for failure, to look around at others living their lives, posting, thriving, shining, and wonder, why do I feel like I've disappeared? Because you have, but only on the surface. Beneath that surface, you're being reassembled. Carl Jung believed that individuation The process of becoming your truest self requires the destruction of false certainty. You must lose the I should to find the I am. This in between, this dark silence, is not the absence of progress. It is the presence of transformation. The caterpillar doesn't halfway become a butterfly. It dissolves into goo, unrecognizable. No turning back, no rushing forward. You are that goo right now. And it's okay. You are not behind. You are not failing. You are in process. If you're in this part of the journey, the part no one talks about, I want you to know, you're not invisible. You're not broken. You're becoming. Like this video if it gave you even one breath of clarity. Subscribe if your soul is hungry for more truth like this. And share it, not just to help the algorithm, but to reach the quiet hearts who feel alone in the void. Drop a comment below and tell me, what does your silence sound like these days? What truth is quietly forming in the dark? What emerges when you stop escaping yourself? Once the numbness sets in and the false self begins to dissolve, something ancient starts to stir. It's not loud. It doesn't demand. It waits for you to stop running, for you to stop performing, for you to sit still long enough to finally meet what's inside. This is where shadow work begins, not in theory, but in your bones, in your breath, in the discomfort that you no longer distract yourself from. Carl Jung wrote, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The darkness is not evil, it is exiled. It is every emotion you were told not to feel, every part of you you had to reject in order to be loved, every truth you silenced just to survive. The rage, the grief, the envy, the wildness, the sensitivity, the desire to be seen, the ache to be free. You were told those parts made you too much or not enough, so you banished them, you buried them, you made yourself small to feel safe. But now, there's no performance left to hide behind. You're not distracted by external validation. You're not numbing through noise. You're still, and when you're still, the shadow speaks, not to shame you, but to show you the power in what you rejected. You are not being haunted by your wounds. You are being invited to hold them, to see them, to represent them. This is not punishment. It's reconciliation. It's how you finally become whole. Why you must stop running from yourself. In a world addicted to movement, stillness feels like failure. We glorify hustle. We idolize busy. Even spirituality gets hijacked into a performance. A checklist of affirmations, crystals, and toxic positivity. But the soul doesn't grow in noise. It deepens in quiet, in surrender, in the space between what you were and what you are becoming. Carl Jung understood this. He believed that the unconscious was a living reality, a vast ocean beneath your waking life. And to truly awaken, you had to be brave enough to descend, to stop distracting, to let the silence show you. You can't bypass the shadow. You can't manifest your way around your wounds. The only way out is through. So, what happens when you stop running? When you sit with the ache, with the fear, with the loneliness you used to outrun, you find the child, the original self, before the roles, before the trauma, before the masks. You meet the part of you that just wanted love, who was pure, whole, and untouched by conditioning. This is not about fixing yourself. It's about remembering yourself, and it only happens in stillness, not the kind you force, but the kind that finds you when you've exhausted every other escape. And suddenly, that silence you feared becomes sacred. You realize it's not empty, it's full, it's alive, it's whispering truths your ego was too loud to hear, and you begin to rebuild, not from pressure, but from presence, not from fear, but from freedom. You are no longer chasing worth, you are reclaiming it from within. Carl Jung taught that healing was not about perfection, it was about integration, bringing together the fragmented parts of the psyche into a cohesive whole. You don't erase the shadow, you integrate it. You give it a seat at the table. You learn to speak its language. You let it show you your power. That rage, it's your boundary. That grief, it's your capacity to love. That envy, it's your roadmap to desire. That fear, it's your compass pointing to freedom. Nothing is wrong with you. Everything you feel is intelligent. Everything you experience is sacred. And once you stop escaping, you start living, not from the conditioned self, but from the authentic self, not the persona, but the soul. You move differently. You speak more slowly. You say no without guilt. You choose peace over performance. You stop apologizing for your depth. You are no longer afraid of your darkness because you have befriended it. You are no longer addicted to light because you carry it within you now. Stillness was never the end. It was the sacred middle. And now, a new self is emerging. In this final section, let us explore what happens when the false self dies. The shadow is integrated, and the soul finally returns to the surface, not as who you were, but as who you truly are. The return of the soul becoming whole after the darkness. There comes a moment, after the unraveling, after the silence, after the shadow work has burned you bare, where something miraculous begins to stir, not from outside, not from validation or achievement, but from deep within. This is the return of the soul, not the ego self, masked and conditioned, but the ancient, eternal self that was never broken, only buried. The rebirth of the true self. Carl Jung believed that the purpose of life wasn't perfection, but individuation, the full realization of the self, the union of conscious and unconscious, a wholeness forged through darkness, through death, through rebirth. And now, you stand at the edge of that rebirth, changed, tender, powerful. You no longer chase the old identity. You no longer shrink for safety. You faced your own abyss and lived, and in surviving it, you've uncovered something rare, an inner authority that no longer relies on the world to tell you who you are. You are not the mask you wore. You are not the role you played. You are not your wounds, nor your wins. You are what remains when all else is stripped away. This is you, as you were always meant to be. You may have thought wholeness would feel like constant peace, like bliss, like transcendence, but that's not what Carl Jung taught. Wholeness is not a high. It's a harmony, a sacred balance, the union of opposites. You still feel pain, but you're no longer afraid of it. You still feel triggered, but you no longer abandon yourself because of it. You are with yourself, in the joy, in the grief, in the confusion, in the clarity. You don't try to escape reality. You embrace it. You live from the middle, from the soul, and that changes everything. Your relationships shift dramatically. You no longer feel drawn to chaos and call it chemistry. You don't confuse inconsistency with passion. You recognize the difference between a soul connection and a trauma bond. You stop begging to be chosen because now you choose yourself. You don't settle for crumbs. You don't chase what's unavailable. You don't sacrifice your peace for the illusion of love. You create relationships that reflect your healing, grounded, secure, reciprocal, where your nervous system feels calm, not constantly activated. You no longer perform to be loved. You simply are, and that's enough. This is the power of returning to the soul. It rewrites your entire way of being, from survival to sovereignty. The death of the false self is terrifying, but what comes after is liberation. You don't wake up every day needing to prove your worth. You know your worth. You don't build your life to impress others. You build it to nourish your soul. You walk slower, speak softer, love deeper. You stop clinging. You stop chasing. You've seen the abyss. Now you live from depth, and that depth becomes your gift to the world. You create art that heals. You speak words that awaken. You hold space for others because you've held space for yourself. Your presence carries truth. It carries wholeness. It carries you. You are no longer a fragment. You are a force. And now, as you listen in this final moment, let me tell you something the world forgot to say. You never had to earn your worth. You were born with it. You never had to pretend to be light. You are light even in your darkness. You never had to chase love. You are love. This silence you feared became your sanctuary. This numbness you ran from was the gateway to your truth. This dark night of the soul was not a punishment. It was a pilgrimage. And you have returned, not empty, but whole. You have remembered what the world asked you to forget, that your soul was never lost. It was only waiting for you to come home. Welcome back. We need you, all of you, especially now. If this journey resonated with you, if you saw yourself in the silence, in the shadow, in the rising, then don't let this moment stay hidden. Click the like button. Let your energy leave a mark. Share this with someone who's walking through the dark. And subscribe for more soul-deep content that honors your path, because you are not alone, and your healing is holy. This is your space, and this is just the beginning. Thank you for being here. We rise together.